I'd like to say I'm very honored to be the recipient of the Kloppenburg Award for Literary Excellence. This award is immensely gratifying to me. Writing is a solitary life. I mean, you're at your desk early in the morning, and you're following your instincts, you're following your sense of what has to come next. But it's very hard to get out of what you do and to see what you have done from the perspective of someone else. Very, very hard. Impossible for me anyway. So to have an award like this is a confirmation, really. Yeah, and I'm very grateful to the Kloppenburg family for this. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about how I came into the writer's life. This sort of life is not inevitable, and so I offer these reflections as an acknowledgement of a whole pile of debts. I was born in North Regina, grew up in that part of the city, went to school there and graduated from the University of Regina, with most of the literature taught me throughout my schooling being British. I went to West Africa with CUSO after graduation and taught high school for 2 years in northeast Nigeria. I wasn't a serious writer before I went to Africa, and I didn't write much at all when I was in Africa. But one extraordinary experience happened to me when I was there. I met my first literary hero, not in the flesh because he had died, but in the spirit. His name was Christopher Okigbo, and he was a poet. I was entranced by his work and also entranced by him. In fact, at one point made a pilgrimage to where he lived in southeastern Nigeria. And another thing that happened to me when I was in Nigeria from a literary point of view was that I witnessed a kind of coming into be of a new literary culture 14 years after Nigerian independence. This literature was helping to define the new Nigeria. I mean, what it was and what it had been and what it could be. And you could feel this happening everywhere in the country, and it was happening because of the work of Okigbo, the poetry of Okigbo, the novels of Chinua Achebe, the novels, plays, memoirs of Woye Soyinka, the work of Cyprian Equincy, John Pepper Clark. I could go on, and out of this was arising a new sense of this country and what it was to be, a kind of communal self-definition, post-colonial self-definition. When I got back to Saskatchewan in the late summer of 1976, lo and behold, I found the same thing, the same phenomenon happening in my home province, led by people like the poet Lorna Crozier, the poet Anne Shumagalski, Pat Lane, Bob Curry, the stories of Guy Vanderhaeghe. A new world seemed to be a new world was appearing. And I knew immediately that I wanted somehow to be part of that. But I realized that I was a latecomer and barely a beginner, actually. But I was very much struck by it, and struck by the energy that came from it, even though I was looking at it from the outside. Many of these writers whose first books I saw on bookshelves in 1976, they're still my creative guides, like Crozier, Shumagalski, and the rest. And I've encountered others as I've went along. I'm just going to give you a list of names here: Andrew Signaski, Louise Half. Names would be very, very familiar to Saskatchewan writers and Saskatchewan readers. Don Demansky, Kevin Paul, Sylvia Legree, Jan's Wiki. I could go on and on. I'd like to add that my debt to Louise Half is more than that to a literary exemplar. My friendship with Louise, and through her with the late elder Joseph P. Cardinal, has deepened my inner life. What I learned in Nigeria, that literature could define a culture, a country, name what it was and could become, I still believe. I saw the same thing happening in Saskatchewan, remarkable writers emerging and hanging out with one another, making a supportive community and a publishing industry right behind them, bringing out their works. I left Saskatchewan in the 2000s, mid-2000s for a job, but I come back often to writing retreats, to teach and edit in the writing program at St. Peter's College, see family, plot new publishing ventures, to collaborate with Robin Poitras and Edward Poitras in New Dance Horizons, marrying poetry to choreography. I definitely feel bilocational. Writing for me has always been a kind of form of activism, probably coming from my early experience in Nigeria, just seeing how those writers affected the communities that they lived in. You know, you never know when people are going to come to writing. Impact is a hugely personal and idiosyncratic thing. I think that the job of writers is to write honestly and deeply, and people will come to it and come to what they've done and be energized by it. Like I go back to Nigeria and I go back to Saskatchewan and in the mid to late 70s, what was happening, huge amount of gift to the general population. In terms of identity, who are we? What is here? So, that was a very important gift. And it was part of the maturation, frankly, I think, of the province. So this first poem is from a book that was published in the mid-90s. It's called Moosewood, Sandhills. And when I was working on it, I was struggling with this question that I'm still struggling with, how to be here. First poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the volume, and it's called In the Hills Watching. Among the nerved grass, thrones, dominions of grass, in chokecherry dew-lapped hills, hills buffalo-shouldered with shag of pulsed heat, meek hills, sandhills of rosehip and aster, in the philanthropic silence fluxed by the grass, hounded, nervous with its own uncountability, grass, the frail piston of all, in hill heat, lying down in the nearness of deer. All-knowing darkens as it builds. The grass is a mirror that clouds as the bright look goes in. You stay in the night, you squat in the hills in the cave of night. Wait. Above, luminous rubble, torn webs of radio signals. Below, stone scrapers, neck bone of a deer, salt beds. The world is ending. And the book ends, Moosewood Sandhills ends with this poem called Restoration. I want to be the knowledge that is one sleep in the sunward shoulder muscle of the 2-year-old doe coming out of hills and down to Moon Lake. I will get there by seeing. The whole body and virtue will rise up and form the look. Seeing is the extreme courtesy that comes when desire is broken. Desire will be broken and will continue with a bright limp. We will move toward Highbush Cranberry and the smell of water. I will be attentive, an oblique crescent near her spine, touched by the light of her liquids. We will be going to Moon Lake, the diamond willows, old Oxbow Lake, reeds round it, the true river, a ruin of water, in dust further on, the red century ending. I will see my way into that place and into that body. This will come only after I've been sitting in the long grass, eating loaves of shadow pressed up through the ground. I will have been dreaming there of one day opening milky eyes and finding myself sick inside her body, high up near the spine, poor, relieved. Sometimes it happens. You lose everything and wake in the strange room of what you want. Except I won't be awake, but asleep and full of gnosis. In my ears, gold pulse of her footsteps. We will go down the hill and enter the shadows of frost-burnt roses and the shade of the smell of water in which reeds and elms are rotting. October sunlight, the shore of a country a small boat is just now pulling away from. I will smell her, light of one locked room in the mansion. I will be in the muscle, a painting on the cave wall of her flesh. I crane into the deer. I am in the bright dark cloud of knowing her and could walk for days. She is at the top of the hill and starting down in early evening. For me, like the writing comes out of these sort of larger questions in a sense, and just a sense that I can't imagine not writing. But I also think it somehow has to come out of the ground. Really, I mean, that has to be there in a way. I also write a lot from sort of personal questions that like big questions that I can't get around by thinking, questions that will stick with me for years. Like one question is simply how to be where I am, you know, as a settler Canadian, how to be here. And the last piece I'm going to read is from a book called Harmonia Mundi, and it was published in 2022. Yeah, Harmonia Mundi, there certainly isn't a harmonious world, but anyway, there's different, there's a long poem in this called The Philosophical History, and maybe this is the first premonition coming into me of climate change and the fascisms that seem to be growing out of it. In a way, it was deeply influenced by the 2016 election in the U.S. So this poem is called Via Pulchritudinus, or The Way of Beauty. Hummingbirds explode overhead and half dark at the feeder, the time before blooms. I eat porridge below. Ravens shriek at fledglings. Ravens juggle extremely gravitied joy in their drowning in their throats' voices. Black brook of the raven's hackling, spiny aura. In the dream from last December, a plummet through sky, accelerating past night's rim, odd flake slicing down a long knight's horn. And at 150 yards, we, cluster of fallers, smelled the animal in a lair ground in its vegetation as it comes in waves out toward us, cowling, armoring us, piling wave. Pinkish light wells through air. Panes of ice on roads and the plain from Seattle, nosing toward a ground impossible to fully light. The raven's cry, a shield or tomb cover, vaults our chest. Is this what safety is? Fires in the interior. One late hummingbird strikes a natalizing course over drought grass up the hill, stung by, uncoiling a new way of beauty. I'd like to again thank the Kloppenburg family for this wonderful award and this recognition. I'd like to thank the people who sat on the jury and the person who nominated me. I am very grateful for this award.